This is for the mass air conversion. I went ahead and unattached it at the coil like I did, I spoke before. Went ahead and moved my AC line, and I took my map sensor off. It used to be a BAP sensor. The map sensor has to be unplugged. There's a vacuum on the speed density here that uses it's called a BAP, but this sensor can still be used. You just unplug the vacuum and let it vent the atmosphere. It's called a map sensor now. You also have to unplug the TFI that went to your distributor. Also has the electronic advance on it. One thing I wanted to show that if you don't want to take your top of your intake off, you can go ahead and plug this vacuum that used to be in the BAP sensor, and I'm going to zip tie this to make it nice and tight. But basically you're just going to want to feed this through the back side of the firewall all the way to the other side. Once we get to that other side, we're going to go ahead and unclip some of our canister stuff and our AC clip, and we're going to try to feed it through the firewall. Alright, this is for the mass air swap. As you can see here, I came over to my solenoid side, coil side, and I've taken apart the mass air that connects. Talking about tack signal. This blue wire connects to the solenoid. This ground is very important. This is one of your EEC grounds. This ground comes through the mass air harness. There's a ground over by the ECU, and there's a ground out here on the fender well. This is especially important for people who are converting their battery to the back of the car. A lot of people just cut this and leave this alone. What you should do is run a 10 gauge wire all the way up here to the front and reconnect this ECU ground. Or basically, this is a direct, let me rephrase that. This should be connected to your ECU mass air harness, but this wire always gets cut here, I'm sorry. This is a direct feed to the battery, as you can see here. Now when you're relocating your battery, you got to feed this line again. You got to feed this with a direct ground from the battery. So it's best to run at least a 10 gauge wire all the way through underneath your carpet, all the way up to here, to reground this so it has a direct feed from the ground, from the battery. Alright, this is mass air conversion. Sorry, I'm linking all these videos together. This is the 88 mass air. You can always tell an 88, 87, 88, 89 harness. There's always a gray and black plug on 87, 88, 89, and I do believe 90 has the same plugs. As you can see here. Try not to spin the camera too fast. Where you at? Here you go. See the two cannon plugs? They're pretty much identical in harness. A couple differences. 87, 88. The ECU relays down here by the large ECU cannon plug, and you can see the difference in the 89. It's actually up the harness a little bit. Also on an 89, naturally you have your mass air plug. And I know 90 looks identical to it, but one thing to tell the difference between an 89 and 90 is 90 they started the airbag conversions, so there's usually a white plug here that's for the front airbag. So one of the two front airbags, passenger side. So it'd have all the same identical features as an 89, but it'd have the airbag sensor. And I do believe a couple of these are pinned differently if I looked at my schematic right. But everything looks good on this. It's always nice to, when you're installing it, to go ahead and tape up quite a bit right here, because this is a spot that gets a lot of, you know, when you're taking them out, you can score up these wires because it's got to come out crooked. It's always good to pull the relay and the cannon plugs out before you actually pull this big one out, because this barely fits in that little hole. So that's it. Alright, this is for the mass air conversion. We went ahead and we actually fed it through. You got to be very careful not to get any sheath on the off the wires. We plugged all our little smog stuff in and all our vacuums back in without breaking it. Went ahead and taped this a little plastic clip, put in here, clipped our O2 in, clipped our wide open AC switch relay in, got a little mass air plug, woohoo! Went ahead and fed it behind the firewall, clipped in our injectors, clipped in our map sensor. It used to be a BAP sensor, went behind it with the wires. Came over here, we actually came behind the window motor, clipped into our black and gray, fed it through here. We zip tied it along with this one, clipped it into our tack. The blue wire went on the hot side of the solenoid and our infamous ground. Sometimes it's kind of hard to clip this together. It's not together unless you hear it go click. So at this point we are good to go. It's always good practice on all your connections, especially when you're using a different harness, to use dielectric tune-up grease and put grease on your connections. We come over to this side. You can see here, got this in here. This is very important to hook this ground up, 9/32 green bolt. Hook these two green bolts up and go ahead and put your AC, or ECU, I'm sorry, in. And get it turned into the hole and then put your frame on. Alright, I'm going to take real quick and show you this O2 harness. We're going to be doing a mass air conversion on this 88 as well. This is more for the mass air video. But you can see here, there's 8 wires. This is the mass air harness side of the O2 sensor, or excuse me, the O2 harness. See all the 8 wires? You can count the 8 pins in there if you wanted to. But you look on the back of this O2 harness, there's actually a jumper for an AOD. Now, this 88 harness can be converted to mass air. If you don't have all 8 wires on the back of your mass air harness, plugging into the O2 plug, cannon plug, you cannot convert your 88 to 87 or 88 to mass air. But thankfully we have an O2 harness here that has the jumper on it, but it has a jumper for an AOD. Now, if I was to convert this A9L computer to this O2 harness, it would fry the return signal on the board. You can repin this to make this work by simply just jumping the pin from number 5 to number 1. It's kind of hard to explain it, but I put the pins, you know, top 4, 1 through 4, bottom 5 through 8. But I just wanted to show you guys that. Some of the 87, 88s do not have this. It only has 5 wires. It doesn't have a return signal for an O2 harness or what have you. That is a tuning nightmare. And what will happen is your O2s, when the car goes closed loop, the way it's explained to me, when you tune, it'll basically not talk to the O2s at all and the car will go limp mode. Sure, the limp mode works real good and seems like it runs real fine, but it'll run rich and it won't run right. Okay, as you can see, I went ahead and pulled the O2 harness out. This is the 88 O2 harness. I don't know if it zooms in or not. Yeah, horrible zoom on this. Anyways, you can see here, see the purple and yellow wire? Should be right here. How it's pinned. Notice on the 5-speed harness it's pinned separately. See how it's pinned differently? All that does is loop and give you a signal return. Tim over at ponyperformance.com in California goes through all of his harnesses, and I like to do a lot of business with him because he goes through and makes sure there's no breaks or anything in his harnesses, and he gives you really good quality harnesses. I also got an 89 mass air harness that you'll actually see later on when we do the actual video of the mass air swap. One thing I wanted to add is V8 O2 harnesses have 3 wires. 4 cylinders have 4. Do not put a 4 plug in or you will fry. Also, there is a left and a right Hugo O2 harness. This is obviously the passenger side, and this is obviously the driver's side. The driver's side always has the low oil sensor connected to it, so you can't really get them backwards.